My name is Lily, and I'm 24 years old. And until last week, I thought I was about to have it all. After years of relentless work, I had just graduated as valedictorian from the best culinary school in the country. At my celebration dinner, with a job offer from a Michelin-starred chef in New York in my hands, my parents looked me dead in the eye and said, "We wish you weren't born." My reply didn't just leave them speechless, it exposed a lie that had poisoned our family for 2 decades. If you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button. Because this story of hidden truths and hard-won freedom might just change how you see family loyalty. My relationship with my family was like an improperly made souffle. It looked fine on the surface, but it was hollow inside and ready to collapse at any moment. I grew up in the shadow of my older sister, Clara. She was 4 years my senior, and in my parents' eyes, she was the sun, and I was just a dim planet in her orbit. Clara was a piano prodigy. From a young age, her fingers danced across the keys with an effortless grace, creating melodies that brought adults to tears. Our house wasn't a home. It was a shrine to Clara's talent. The pristine living room was dominated by her piano, a sacred object we were barely allowed to breathe near. Every conversation, every financial decision, every hope and dream revolved around her. I, meanwhile, found my passion in a different world entirely. The kitchen. The kitchen was my sanctuary. While the rest of the house echoed with scales and arpeggios, my world was filled with the sizzle of garlic and olive oil, the smell of baking bread, the rhythmic chop of vegetables. It was a place where I could create something tangible, something that brought joy and comfort, unlike the melancholy Chopin sonatas that always echoed through the hallways. But in my family, my passion was dismissed as a quaint hobby, a domestic utility. "Cooking is a useful skill, dear," my mother would say with a patronizing smile. "It will serve you well when you have a family of your own. But Clara's art is going to change the world." The injustice wasn't just emotional, it was deeply financial. When I was 15, I won a spot at a prestigious culinary summer camp for teens. The tuition was $2,000. I had worked for an entire year, saving every dollar from babysitting and bussing tables at a local diner. I had saved $1,500. I just needed my parents to help with the last $500. I presented my case at the dinner table, my hands trembling with a mix of pride and anxiety. "Lily, you know we can't," my father said, his voice laced with practiced regret as he avoided my eyes. "All our savings have to go toward Clara's new Steinway. Her big recital is coming up. It's an investment in her future." 3 months later, the $20,000 piano arrived, gleaming and majestic in our living room. Clara played it for 2 weeks before declaring the feel of the keys didn't suit her style and went back to her old one. The Steinway became an expensive, silent monument to her whims, a piece of furniture that collected dust. I didn't go to camp that year. Instead, I used my $1,500 to pay for an unexpected car repair bill my parents had forgotten to budget for. They accepted the money with relieved smiles, telling me how mature and responsible I was. It was the first time I realized that, in my family, being responsible meant cleaning up their financial messes. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. My college fund, which I started with my own money from a part-time job at 16, was repeatedly borrowed from for Clara's master classes, her competition travel, her performance gowns. "Your sister needs this, Lily," my mother would explain, her hand on my arm. "This is her career. You can work your way through community college. You're so resourceful." Resourceful was just another word for neglected. I did just that. I worked 2 jobs while attending community college, then transferred to a good culinary school on a mixture of scholarships and loans. Every penny I earned was carefully accounted for. Yet, my family still treated me as a financial safety net. "Lily, the furnace is acting up again. Can you help? Lily, Clara needs a new laptop for her compositions. Can you spot her a few hundred?" Spot was a funny word, as the money never returned. The only person in my family who truly saw me was my grandmother, Eleanor. She was a baker, the one who gave me my love of flour and sugar. She lived 2 towns over, and her small house, with its ancient, reliable oven, was my true sanctuary. She taught me how to knead dough by feel, how to know when a cake was perfectly baked just by its scent. But more than that, she listened. She'd sit at her small kitchen table, sipping tea, while I poured out my frustrations. "You have a gift, my girl," she'd say, dusting flour off her apron. "Don't you ever let anyone tell you it's less important than the noise they're making." When she passed away 2 years ago, I felt like I'd lost my only anchor. She left me only one thing, an old cedar box. Inside was a stack of letters tied with a ribbon. "Read one a month," a handwritten note on top said. "And the last one you wait for. Wait until the day you graduate. It's the most important one." For 2 years, her letters were my companion, filled with recipes, stories of her youth, and words of encouragement that always seemed to arrive just when I needed them. I didn't know what the final letter held, but I clung to its promise like a lifeline. I thought I could endure anything until graduation, but I had no idea that my own success would be the very thing that ignited the coming storm. The catalyst was a piece of paper, a beautifully framed diploma declaring that I, Lily Thompson, had not only graduated, but had done so as the valedictorian of my class. And next to it, another letter, a thick one with the letterhead of the 3 Michelin-starred restaurant Aria in New York City. Graduation day was a blur of caps and gowns, speeches, and happy tears. When my name was called for the valedictorian award, a genuine shockwave went through me. I hadn't expected it. I had just worked as hard as I could. I scanned the crowd, looking for my family's faces. I spotted them near the back, my father checking his watch, my mother whispering something to Clara, who was idly scrolling through her phone. They clapped politely, a perfunctory gesture in a sea of genuine cheers from my friends and professors. It was a familiar sting, but I was determined not to let it ruin my day. This was the culmination of every long shift, every late night studying, every sacrifice. After the ceremony, Chef Dubois, a living legend in the culinary world and my idol, pulled me aside. His presence was commanding, but his eyes were kind. "Lily," he said in his thick French accent, "your palate, your dedication, your talent is a once-in-a-generation thing. I made a call to an old friend, Chef Julian Vance at Aria. He has seen your portfolio. He is very impressed." He handed me an envelope. The paper felt heavy, important. "This is a formal job offer, sous chef apprenticeship. The starting salary is more than most chefs make in their first 5 years. He wants you to start next month." My heart stopped. Aria wasn't just a restaurant, it was an institution. Julian Vance wasn't just a chef, he was an artist. This wasn't a job, it was the dream. I stammered my thanks, my hands shaking as I took the letter. This was it, the validation I had craved, the proof that my passion was more than just a quaint hobby. I ran to my family. my face glowing with an excitement that felt like it could light up the entire stadium. "Can you believe it? Aria! In New York!" I waved the letter like a victory flag. "New York?" my mother said, her brow furrowing in a familiar expression of concern that always felt more like disapproval. "That's so far away." "The pay must be decent," my father remarked, eyeing the envelope as if trying to assess its monetary value. "But the cost of living there is astronomical." "I've been." Clara finally looked up from her phone, a smirk playing on her lips. "Well, little sister, finally did something impressive. But how will you manage in a big city like that all by yourself? You've always been so needy." Her words were a splash of cold water, but I brushed it off. Tonight, nothing could bring me down. We were going to dinner at the Gilded Spoon, the fanciest restaurant in town, to celebrate. I had made the reservation months ago, paying the deposit myself. Tonight was about me, or so I thought. As we drove to the restaurant, the initial euphoria began to fade, replaced by a familiar sense of dread. The conversation in the car was all about Clara. She was thinking of getting back into her music seriously. She needed a new studio space. She thought she might start teaching advanced classes. My parents listened intently, offering suggestions and promising support. My achievement, my dream job, was already forgotten, a brief and shiny object now discarded. When we were seated, the waiter approached and congratulated me, noting the restaurant had heard about my award. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope, but then my father waved him away dismissively. "We'll need some family privacy," he said curtly. The dinner was ordered, the wine was poured. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken things. I looked around the table at my father's stern expression, my mother nervously twisting her napkin, and Clara, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't jealousy, it was calculation. I felt like I was walking into a finely orchestrated trap. My celebration dinner was slowly turning into an inquisition, and I had no idea that the verdict had been decided long before the appetizers arrived. The escalation began subtly, the way the temperature rises in a pot of water just before it boils. It started with veiled remarks and carefully curated memories, a symphony of guilt conducted by my parents. "Do you remember Clara's first grand piano, Mark?" my mother began, swirling her wine. "It took our savings for a year, but to see her little face light up, it was worth it." My father nodded gravely. "Of course. And the trips to competitions, driving through the night, sleeping in cheap motels, just so she could have her shot. We did everything for you girls. For Clara, I thought. But I just smiled and took a sip of water. The narrative was so practiced, so smooth, I could have recited it along with them. The stories continued, a highlight reel of Clara's accomplishments and my parents' sacrifices. They spoke of her first recital, the article in the local paper that hailed her as a budding virtuoso, the whispers of a full scholarship to a prestigious conservatory. Each story was told with a wistful sadness, as if they were reminiscing about a glory that had been lost, a potential squandered by circumstance. "I was so close," Clara said softly, her eyes distant as if seeing a ghost. "You can't understand the pressure, Lily, when everyone expects you to be great." I tried to pivot the conversation, to bring it back to the present, to my celebration. "Well, speaking of great opportunities, this job at Aria is really We'll get to that," my father interrupted, holding up a hand like a traffic cop. "Right now, we're talking about family." Every attempt I made to share my excitement was stonewalled. The food arrived, seared scallops for me, something I had been dying to try, but I could barely taste it. My appetite had been replaced by a cold knot in my stomach. The rich, buttery sauce felt like ash in my mouth. Then, the attacks became more direct, less veiled. "Honestly, Lily," my mother said, setting down her fork with a delicate clink, "I'm a little worried about this New York thing. You've always been the practical one. Cooking is a steady job, a trade. But this world of celebrity chefs, it's so cutthroat. It's not like Clara's natural-born talent." "Ah, my talent isn't natural?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The question hung in the air, a direct challenge to their lifelong narrative. I didn't just work 12-hour days in a hot kitchen for 4 years. "That's not what I mean, dear," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, a tone she used when she was trying to smooth over a blatant insult. "It's just, some things come more easily to some people. Clara had a gift from God. You have a skill you worked hard for. It's different." That's when Clara moved in for the kill. "Mom's right. Besides, New York is so expensive. What are you going to do if you fail? You'll just come crawling back home for money like you always do." The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the question stunned me into silence. Me, whose savings were perpetually drained for her whims. Me, who had paid the security deposit on her current apartment just last year after she'd been evicted from her previous one. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a bitterness in her eyes I'd never registered before. She wasn't just indifferent to my success. She resented it. My father then steered the conversation in a new direction. One that seemed unrelated at first, but I soon realized was part of the same strategy. He started talking about their finances, the volatile stock market, the cost of home repairs. He painted a picture of struggle and uncertainty, of two people nearing retirement with a fragile nest egg. "We're getting older, Lily," he said, his voice taking on a calculated weariness. "We don't have the energy we used to. Sometimes, I wonder how we're going to manage in our later years." I felt a sickeningly familiar dread creep in. This was the wind-up, the prelude to a request. It always started like this. A story of their sacrifice, a downplaying of my achievements, and a lament about their struggles. I had been through this performance dozens of times. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was a text from my best friend, Maya, who had graduated with me. "Maya, are they popping the champagne for our star chef? You deserve to be treated like a queen tonight." I looked around the table, at the grim faces of my family, the heavy air of expectation, and felt a profound disconnect. I was no queen. I wasn't even a princess. I was a pawn in their game, and it felt like I was about to be sacrificed. I quickly texted back, my thumbs fumbling under the table. "Me. Not exactly, it feels weird. Like an ambush. I'll call you later." Her reply was almost instant. "Maya, weird how? Lily, do not let them dim your shine. If they aren't celebrating you, they don't deserve to be there. Remember who you are. Valedictorian, aria bound, a total rock star." Her words were like a shot of oxygen in a stuffy room. She was right. But as I looked up from my phone, I saw my parents and sister watching me, their gazes chillingly in sync. The performance was over. It was time for the main act. "Lily," my father began, his voice taking on a false solemnity that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "There's something we need to discuss. Something that has been weighing on this family for years. It's about Clara, and it's about you." The escalation had reached its peak. They had built their stage, retold their narrative, and now it was time for them to make their demand. I gripped my napkin under the table, my nails digging into my palm. I felt a cold anger begin to form, eclipsing the hurt. Whatever was coming next, I knew it would change everything. I just didn't realize how cruel it would be. 20 years ago, my father said, his voice dropping like a judge about to deliver a sentence, your sister was on the verge of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He paused, letting his words hang in the air, a master of dramatic effect. My mother nodded gravely, and Clara looked down at her hands, feigning a look of humble tragedy that was almost convincing. The Juilliard School, my father continued. They were scouting her. A full scholarship was practically on the table. All she needed was one final, focused year of training, free from distractions, with the best coach. We had a plan. We were remortgaging the house to pay for it. I knew this story. It was the Thompson family legend, but I'd never heard it told with such a pointed, accusatory tone. It was no longer a story of what could have been. It was a story of who was to blame. And then, my mother said, picking up the thread seamlessly, as if they had rehearsed this, we found out I was pregnant with you. The words hung over the table, heavy and toxic. She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw no maternal love in her eyes. I saw only resentment, deep and old, like a stain that had set for years. Everything changed, my father said. A new baby meant new expenses, diapers, formula, medical care, and our attention was divided. We couldn't give Clara the financial and emotional support she needed in that crucial year. The remortgage money had to be used to cover you. The opportunity was lost, my mother whispered, a single, perfect tear tracing a path down her cheek. It was all because of the timing. We lost our concert pianist. I sat there, stunned, the air knocked out of my lungs. They weren't just saying my birth was an inconvenience. They were saying my existence had actively destroyed my sister's dream. They were making me, an infant, the villain in their family tragedy. That's not true, I managed, my voice trembling. You can't possibly believe that. And then, my father said the words that will be etched into my mind for the rest of my life. He looked directly at me, with no hesitation, no flicker of remorse. Honestly, Lily, there have been times over the years when your mother and I have talked, and we agree. Sometimes we wish you weren't born. Oh, the room went silent. The clatter of silverware from other diners, the soft jazz music, it all faded away. There was only a roaring in my ears. I looked at Clara, desperately hoping she would speak up, defend me, say that was a horrible thing to say. But she just looked away, her jaw set, refusing to meet my eyes. Her silence was a confirmation, an endorsement. That was the breaking point. No, it wasn't a breaking point. It was a flood. A dam bursting, unleashing 24 years of repressed hurt. Every slight, every unacknowledged sacrifice, every belittling comment, it all rushed into this one moment. I realized a brutal truth. They didn't love me. Maybe they never had. They had tolerated me. They had raised me out of a sense of duty. But in their eyes, I was a liability. A permanent reminder of a life they thought they were supposed to have. And now, they had come to collect the debt. And that is why, my mother said, her voice becoming firm, the tears vanishing as if on cue, you owe your sister. That job in New York, my father said, leaning forward. You have to turn it down. You'll stay here, get a job as a local line cook. You'll live at home to save money. Your entire income, minus minimal expenses, will go toward funding Clara's music school. It's her second chance, and you are going to give it to her. It's the least you can do to make up for the damage you caused." I looked at them, at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and I didn't feel pain anymore. The pain had been cauterized and replaced by something else, a hard, cold clarity. I saw them for what they were, not parents and a sister, but bullies, manipulators, people who had built one child's happiness on the ruin of the other. My moment of awakening wasn't a bang. It was a dead silence in my soul. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their love, to prove my worth. I now saw that it was a rigged game. I could never win, because from the very beginning, they had decided I had to lose. I slowly placed my napkin on the table. I stood up. "I need to use the restroom," I said, my voice eerily calm. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on me. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken, that I would come back to the table and accept my fate. They were wrong. I wasn't walking to the restroom. I was walking toward the exit, and more importantly, I was walking home, to a cedar box, and one final letter that was waiting for me. Their inquisition was over, but mine was just about to begin. I didn't go back to the table. I walked straight through the revolving glass doors of the Gilded Spoon into the cool night air, and I didn't look back. I walked in a daze for a few blocks, the sounds of the city buzzing around me but not penetrating my thoughts. "We wish you weren't born," the words repeated in my head, no longer a painful stab, but a cold, steady drumbeat, marking the end of one era and the beginning of something new. Instead of going to my parents' house, I drove to the small apartment I shared with a friend. I went into my room, closed the door, and sat on the floor. For a moment, I just sat there in the dark, letting the emptiness wash over me. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean of any illusions I still held. Then I saw it. Resting on top of my dresser, covered in a thin layer of dust, was my grandmother's cedar box, my secret weapon. My hands trembled as I lifted the box down. The familiar scent of cedar filled the small room, a comforting ghost from my past. I had read all the letters but one, the last one. "Wait until the day you graduate." Today was that day. I gently untied the faded ribbon and took out the final envelope. It was thicker than the others. My name was written on it in my grandmother's elegant, familiar script. I took a deep breath and opened it. Inside wasn't just a letter. There was a sheaf of stapled documents and a small, old-fashioned key. I set those aside and unfolded the letter first. "My dearest Lily, if you are reading this, it means you did it. You graduated. I can't tell you how proud I am, though I hope you can feel it across these pages. I have watched you, my girl. I have seen you struggle. I have seen you sacrifice, and I have seen you never, ever let go of the fire inside you, even when others tried to blow it out. I am writing this because there is a truth you need to know, a truth your parents and sister have chosen to bury, because it doesn't fit the story they want to tell. It's about Juilliard, about Clara's lost chance. Lily, your birth had nothing to do with Clara not going to Juilliard. The truth is, she never really had the shot. Yes, they scouted her, but when it came time to do the real work, when the pressure became real, Clara folded. I was there. I heard the fights in the next room. She stopped practicing. She said it was too hard. On the day of her final audition, the one that would have decided the scholarship, she refused to go. She locked herself in her room, crying and screaming that she didn't want to do it anymore, that she hated the piano. Your parents were devastated, not because their daughter had quit, but because their image of perfection had shattered. It was so much easier to blame a newborn baby than to admit that their golden child wasn't perfect. They chose an easy lie over a difficult truth, and they have made you carry the weight of that lie your entire life. I had to stop, a sob catching in my throat. The tears that fell weren't of sadness, but of a strange, painful relief. It wasn't my fault. It had never been my fault. My entire identity within my family had been built on a lie crafted to protect the fragile egos of my sister and parents. I wiped my eyes and read on. The truth will set you free, Lily. But I know that truth alone is not enough. You need the tools to build a new life, one that is all your own. That is what the other papers are for. 10 years ago, after your grandfather passed, I invested part of his life insurance. I did very well. I set up a trust fund in your name. It's being managed by a wonderful old family friend, a financial planner named Mr. David Chen. The funds cannot be touched by anyone until you graduate. They are yours, and yours alone. Lily, the amount in that fund is $250,000. I gasped, rereading the sentence 3 times. $250,000. The number was surreal, impossible. Use it wisely. Go to New York. Take that job. Open your own restaurant one day. Do not give your family a dime unless they have truly earned it. This key is to a safe deposit box at Central Bank. Inside are all the original trust documents. Mr. Chen is expecting your call. His number is with the papers. Live a beautiful life, my girl. Live it for you. It's all I ever wanted. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor. I sat there on the floor, amidst the wreckage of my old life and the blueprints for a new one. I didn't just have the truth. I had the means. I had the power. My anger receded, replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. They had underestimated me for the last time. The next morning, the first thing I did was call Mr. David Chen. He was a kind, elderly man who remembered my grandmother fondly. He confirmed everything. The trust was real. The money was ready to be transferred. He offered to meet with me to discuss investment strategies and financial management. Your grandmother was a very wise woman, he said. She knew you would need this. She said you had a spine of steel, even if you didn't know it yet. Next, I went to the bank. I used the key and opened the safe deposit box. Everything was there, neatly organized in a leather-bound folder. I held the papers, feeling their weight in my hands. This wasn't just money. This was independence. This was my grandmother's final gift. My plan began to form. It wasn't complicated. It was simple. It had 3 steps. Step 1. Secure my future. I called Chef Vance at Aria back. My voice was clear and confident. I formally accepted the job offer. That same day, I went online and used a small portion of the fund to put a deposit down on a small studio apartment in Brooklyn, near a good subway line. The commitment was made. There was no turning back. Step 2. Cut the ties. I went to my own bank and opened a new account at a different branch. I transferred all of my meager savings into it, ensuring my parents, who were still on my old account from when I was a teenager for emergencies, couldn't touch it. I closed the old account permanently. Step 3. The confrontation. This was the hardest part, but it was necessary. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing this for the truth. I sent a group text message to my parents and Clara. We need to talk. Be at my apartment Sunday night, 7 p.m. There are things that need to be cleared up. Clara replied almost instantly. About time you came to your senses. They thought I was coming home with my tail between my legs. They thought I was going to beg for forgiveness. They had no idea I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was writing my own rules, On Sunday night, my apartment, normally a quiet space, felt like a boxing ring before a title fight. The air was thick with anticipation. I had spent the day preparing, not by cooking, but by arranging my weapons. On the coffee table, I laid out 3 items in a neat row. My grandmother's letter, a copy of the trust fund documents provided by Mr. Chen, and my signed contract with Arya. Each one represented a pillar of my new reality: truth, means, and future. They arrived promptly at 7, a unified front of self-satisfaction. My father entered first, with the gait of a man arriving to accept a surrender. My mother followed, her face carefully composed into an expression of pitying disappointment. Clara sauntered in last, scrolling on her phone, as if this whole affair was an inconvenience interrupting her evening. "Hello, Lily," my father said, not bothering to take off his coat. "I hope you've had time to think about your irresponsibility and are ready to have a reasonable discussion." "I've done a lot of thinking," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "Please, sit down." They settled onto the sofa, pressed close together, a single block of judgment. I sat in the armchair across from them. I was an island. I felt the distance between us not as a void, but as a fortification. "Before you say anything," I began, stressing the word "you," "there's a story I want to tell. It's about a girl named Clara." Clara looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed. "What is this? If you're going to be dramatic, just listen," I said, and my tone was not a request. I recounted the story my grandmother had written in her letter. I didn't embellish. I simply stated the facts. About her stopping her practice. About her screaming that she hated the piano. About her locking herself in her room and refusing to go to the audition. As I spoke, I watched them. My mother began to fidget, her face paling. My father went rigid, his jaw tight, and Clara looked like she had just been slapped. The mask of bored indifference fell away, replaced by raw panic. "That's a lie," Clara stammered when I was finished. "Grandma was old. She was confused. She made things up." "Oh," she remembered perfectly, I said. I picked up my grandmother's letter. She even wrote it all down, right here. I began to read key passages aloud. My voice was steady, devoid of emotion. I was just the messenger, delivering a 20-year-old truth. It was so much easier to blame a newborn baby than to admit that their golden child wasn't perfect. They chose an easy lie over a difficult truth. "Stop it," my mother whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. She couldn't look me in the eye. I didn't stop. I read to the end. When I was done, I placed the letter on the table. The silence in the room was deafening. Their lie, the foundation of our family for 2 decades, had been exposed in the harsh light of truth. She didn't understand the pressure, Clara finally said, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and shame. "You have no idea what it was like. Everyone watching me, waiting for me to be perfect. So you admit it?" I asked, my voice soft but sharp. "You admit that Grandma was telling the truth?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her face said it all. My father was the first to recover, falling back on his default setting. Attack. So what? Even if some of that is true, it doesn't change the fact that we sacrificed for you. My career, your mother's health. Sacrifice? I cut him off, and this time, the anger I had been suppressing finally broke through, clean and hot. "Let's talk about sacrifice. Let's talk about the culinary camp I couldn't go to so you could buy an ornamental piano." Let's talk about my college fund that vanished to pay for Clara's dresses. Let's talk about all the times I paid your bills, fixed your car, loaned you money that was never returned. Don't you dare talk to me about sacrifice. Oh, how dare you? My mother began. No, how dare you? I shouted, getting to my feet, the force of my own voice surprising me. How dare you sit at my celebration dinner and tell me you wish I wasn't born? How dare you try to destroy my dream to fund a fantasy that was based on a lie? I walked to the coffee table and picked up the 2 remaining papers. You want me to give up my job in New York? I said, waving the Aria contract. Not happening. I've accepted. I start the 1st of August. Oh. Then I picked up the trust fund documents. And you want me to work to support Clara? You think I have nothing, that I'm dependent on you. You're wrong. Grandma made sure of that. I threw the papers onto the table in front of them. This is a trust fund my grandmother set up for me. For $250,000. It's mine, and you will never see a single cent of it. They stared at the papers, jaws slack. The shock on their faces was almost payment enough for the years of pain. They had seen me as a burden, a failure. Now they saw me as a person with power, a person they could no longer control. My father looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw a new glint. Not anger, calculation. Lily, he said, his voice suddenly smooth as silk. We've been harsh. We were upset. We didn't realize. You know, a family should manage its finances together. We can help you invest that. No, I said, the word cold and final. Not anymore. This family, this version of it you created, is over tonight. I am done being your scapegoat, your ATM, and your disappointment. I walked to the door and opened it. Now get out of my apartment. They sat there, stunned into immobility. I said, get out? I repeated, my voice echoing in the small room. Slowly they rose, defeated figures. My mother was crying silently. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Clara couldn't even look at me. As they passed me in the doorway, my mother stopped. Lily, please, we can fix this. No, I said, meeting her tear-filled eyes without flinching. There are no words you can say that will fix this. I need time, a lot of it. And just like that, they were gone. I closed the door, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot. I leaned against it, my whole body shaking. I had done it. I had spoken the truth. I had taken my life back. My apartment suddenly felt bigger, brighter, because for the first time, it was truly all mine. The days following the confrontation were a strange mix of emptiness and exhilarating freedom. The silence from my family was deafening. No angry phone calls, no guilt-laced text messages, just nothing. It was as if by refusing to play my part in their drama, I had ceased to exist to them. And while a small, wounded part of me ached at the finality of it, a much larger part felt an incredible sense of relief, like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted. Maya became my rock. When I told her everything, detail by painful detail, she wasn't surprised. I knew they were like that, she said, wrapping me in a hug. I was just waiting for you to see it for yourself. Now, let's get you to New York. She helped me organize, pack, and plan for my move. Her steady, non-judgmental presence was a constant reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, and about who shows up for you when the chips are down. A week before I left, I was doing a final clean-out of my apartment. I found an old photo box under my bed. Inside were pictures of me and Clara as little girls' gap-toothed smiles, identical dresses, arms thrown around each other, For a moment, a wave of sadness washed over me for what was lost. For the sisterhood we were supposed to have. The one that was stolen by a lie. I cried, not for the people they had become, but for the people I had once hoped they would be. After a few minutes, I closed the box and taped it shut. I couldn't take the past with me, but I didn't have to erase it either. It was a part of my story. The day I left my apartment key on the counter with a short note from my parents. Mom and Dad, I'm going to New York. I don't know when or if we will speak again. I need to heal, and I can't do that in the shadow of the lie you created. Maybe one day, you'll understand the damage you've done. Lily. Driving out of my hometown, with all my worldly possessions packed into my old car, I felt like I was shedding a skin. Each passing mile, the weight of their expectations and resentments seemed to lighten. When I saw the "Welcome to New York" sign, I didn't just smile. I laughed out loud, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. This wasn't just a new city, it was a new life. My Brooklyn apartment was tiny, with a single window that looked out onto a brick wall, but it was heaven. It was mine. No one could take it away, or make me feel like an intruder in my own home. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. The city was huge and overwhelming. The work at Aria was brutally demanding, with 14-hour shifts that left me physically and mentally exhausted. But it was a good kind of tired. It was the exhaustion that comes from building something. Chef Vance was a tough but fair mentor. He saw my potential and pushed me beyond my limits. For the first time in my life, I was being judged solely on my talent and my hard work, not through the lens of someone else's disappointment. About a month after I moved, I got an email from my father. It was short and clipped. He wrote that they were struggling. Apparently, they had grown so accustomed to my contributions to the bills that they had not realized how dependent they were. Clara had tried to start her music classes, but no students had signed up. They had to sell the Steinway piano to pay off some debts. There was no apology, just a status report that heavily implied it was all my fault. I read the email, felt a fleeting pang of something that might have been pity, and then I deleted it. Their financial problems were the consequences of their own choices, not my responsibility to fix. My new dawn had no room for their old clouds. I was too busy building a future that was too bright to be overshadowed by their past. 1 year can change everything. 12 months after I drove out of my hometown, my life was unrecognizable. I was standing in the space that would soon be my very first restaurant, Eleanor's, named after my grandmother. It was small, just 10 tables, on a quiet street in the West Village. The smell of fresh paint and sawdust filled the air. With Mr. Chen's guidance and a small business loan secured by my trust fund, my dream was taking shape, built on a foundation of truth and my own hard work. My time at Aria had been phenomenal. I learned more in that 1 year under Chef Vance than in 4 years of culinary school. I had absorbed every technique, every flavor profile. I had been promoted to sous chef, a meteoric rise that was unheard of. But I knew I was meant to create something of my own, a place that felt like my grandmother's kitchen, warm, inviting, and honest. Chef Vance, rather than feeling betrayed, became my biggest champion. "It is time," he said when I handed in my notice. "The world needs to taste your food, not just mine. You have a story to tell with your cooking, Lily. Go tell it." My personal life had blossomed too. I had a tight-knit group of friends, fellow chefs, artists, writers who loved me for who I was. We were a chosen family, bound by shared passions and mutual respect. We celebrated each other's victories and supported each other through failures. I had even started dating an architect named Ben, who had helped me design the space for Eleanor's. He was kind, funny, and when he listened to me, he really listened. With him, I felt seen, not sized up. Meanwhile, back home, justice had been served. Not through revenge, but through the quiet, inevitable unfolding of natural consequences. I heard the news in bits and pieces from Maya, who still lived there. My parents had been forced to sell the house I grew up in. They couldn't afford it without my income, and my father's poor investments had finally caught up with him. They moved into a much smaller apartment, a downsize my mother found deeply humiliating. They had lost their shrine to Clara's supposed genius. Clara's fate was perhaps the most telling. Her attempt at a music school failed spectacularly. Without my endless funding and my parents' ability to create a bubble of illusion around her, she was faced with the harsh reality of running a business. She lacked the patience, the work ethic, and the genuine passion to attract students. Last Maya heard, she was working part-time at a department store, bitter and blaming everyone but herself for her unrealized dreams. The lie they had all lived for so long had collapsed, and they didn't know how to live in the rubble. About 8 months after I left, I received a handwritten letter from my mother. It was the first time she had reached out directly. It was 4 pages long, rambling and full of self-pity. But woven into it, there was a glimmer of something new. Accountability. "Your father and I have been talking a lot," she wrote. "We were wrong. We were so wrong, Lily. We put too much on you, and too much hope into a dream that wasn't ours to have. Watching Clara struggle has made us realize that we didn't help her by shielding her from reality, and we hurt you unforgivably in the process. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just want you to know that I am sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. It was an acknowledgement." I didn't reply right away. I needed time. 2 months ago, on my birthday, I called them. The conversation was awkward and halting. They asked about the restaurant. I asked about their jobs. We avoided the topic of Clara, but there were no accusations, no manipulation, just a sad acknowledgement of the distance between us. I have established new boundaries. Our relationship, if it is to exist, will be on my terms. There will be no money. There will be no emotional demands. Just honest, occasional conversation. They agreed. Standing in my nearly finished restaurant, I thought about the journey that brought me here. The pain of that graduation dinner hadn't destroyed me. It had liberated me. It had forced me to confront a truth that I had known on some level all along. I could not find my worth in their approval. I had to create it myself, and I had. Từng viên gạch, từng công thức, từng quyết định can đảm. Ngôi nhà thực sự của tôi không phải là một tòa nhà, mà là cuộc sống mà tôi đã xây dựng cho chính mình. As I look back on this last year, the biggest lesson I learned wasn't about cooking or business. It was about value. For years, I had let my family define my worth. They had put a price tag on me less than Clara, just enough to be useful, but never enough to be celebrated. They made love a transaction, and I was always the one paying the price. That horrible dinner forced me to tear off that price tag. I realized that self-worth isn't something other people give you. It's something you claim for yourself. My grandmother knew that. Her trust fund wasn't just money. It was permission. Permission to invest in myself, to believe in my own dreams, and to walk away from a table where respect wasn't on the menu. Family can be a complicated thing. It can be our greatest source of strength, but sometimes it can also be our cage. Setting boundaries isn't a selfish act. It's an act of survival. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you love yourself enough not to let their version of love destroy you. I still love my parents and my sister on some level, but I love them from a safe distance, a distance that allows me to be myself without their permission or approval. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between pleasing your family and following your own path? What lessons did you learn about setting boundaries and claiming your own worth? Share your stories in the comments below. I read them all. And if this story resonated with you, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of overcoming challenges. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to hear that they have the right to write their own recipe for life. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the most bitter endings can lead to the sweetest new beginnings.